Leave us
The
alone!
billionaire returned
You
suddenly,
ruined everything!
witnessed his
I'm calling
stepsister
the police!
humiliate his humble wife.
Get out of
What
her
happened
face right
after?
now!
Birds flew low, and the wind carried whispers of distant mountains. Villagers below glanced nervously at the sky, feeling an unusual energy stir, as if the land itself had been waiting for someone. Cale Darien had returned. For years he had been gone, traveling far beyond the kingdom's borders, in lands where magic and mystery mingled freely with mortal life. Stories about him had grown into legends. Some spoke of a young lord turned into a master of shadow and fire. Others claimed he had bargained with spirits of the ancient forests. No one knew exactly what had happened, but everyone in the palace knew this. Cale Darien's return would change everything. The halls of the palace were alive with whispers. Courtiers hurried through marble corridors, their silks rustling softly. Servants lingered near doors, peeking with wide eyes. And in the grand hall, Lady Selene Darien, Cale's stepsister, was in the middle of her usual display, humiliating yet another servant for a minor mistake. She was beautiful, cruel, and perfectly aware of her power. Her sharp eyes scanned the room as though she owned every corner of it. At that moment, Cale entered. The heavy doors swung open and a hush fell over the hall. People froze mid-step, mid-whisper, mid-breath. He walked slowly, deliberately, each step measured, his dark coat brushing the marble floor, echoing like a drum of warning. His eyes were sharp, aware, and for a moment the room felt as if it had been pulled into a quiet before a storm. Cale's gaze fell on the scene he had been dreading. Lady Selene was at the center of the hall, speaking in the soft, venomous tone she reserved for people she considered weak. Lyra, Cale's wife, stood near the steps of the dais, trying to smile, trying to hide the sting of humiliation as Selene whispered cutting words to a group of noblewomen about her. Lyra's cheeks burned, not from anger but from shame. Her hands trembled slightly, hidden beneath the folds of her simple gown. She was not weak, not truly, but the court had made cruelty an art, and Selene was its finest practitioner. Cale stopped a few steps away, feeling an unexpected twist of something deep inside him. Anger. No, something darker, something protective. His presence alone seemed to shift the atmosphere. The chatter of the court quieted into whispers. Even Selene felt it, a shadow moving over the room, heavy and almost tangible. "Cale," Lyra whispered, not moving, not daring to look at him. Her voice was soft, a gentle sound amid the tension. Selene's eyes snapped toward him, a smirk curling at her lips. "So, the prodigal brother returns. I wondered how long it would take before you graced us with your presence," she said, her tone cool, her words carefully measured. "I hope you find the court as enlightening as I do." Cale's gaze flicked to her, calm but full of intent. "I find it revealing," he said, his voice quiet but cutting through the hall. He turned his eyes to Lyra, who felt both fear and relief at the same time. He was here. He saw everything. The courtiers murmured, exchanging glances. Some whispered about the legendary powers Cale had acquired. Others worried about what Selene might do next. No one dared interrupt, though a few quietly hoped Cale would act. Selene, never one to back down, straightened her posture. She was clever and she had known Cale's return was inevitable. "Lyra," she said, stepping closer, her voice softening in mock sympathy. "You do try, I'll give you that. But some things, some people, are simply not fit for court life." She let her words hang in the air, sharp as knives. Lyra's hands clenched at her sides, but she did not speak. She had learned long ago that arguing with Selene only made matters worse. Cale noticed her restraint, her quiet dignity, and his chest tightened. Cale finally moved, his steps deliberate and silent. He stopped beside Lyra and placed a protective hand lightly on her shoulder, not as a show for the court, but a silent promise that he would not let her suffer alone. The hall seemed to hold its breath. The tension between the siblings was like a live wire. Cale's eyes, dark and unreadable, met Selene's with an intensity that made even the bravest nobles step back. "You forget, Selene," Kale said quietly, almost to himself, but loud enough for her to hear, "that the crown is not yours to wield against the innocent." Selene's smirk faltered slightly. She was cunning, yes, but Kale had changed. The boy she had once known was gone. In his place was a man tempered by distance, by magic, by years where power had grown quietly in shadows. The court fell silent. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim under the weight of the moment. Kale took another step forward, his presence commanding and quiet at once. "I suggest you choose your words with care, stepsister," he added, his voice low but filled with authority. Selene's eyes narrowed, calculating. She had always enjoyed power, and she was not used to being challenged so directly. But Kale's calm fury unnerved her. She was clever, but the years had changed the world, and Kale had changed more than anyone realized. Lyra, feeling the shift, dared to raise her eyes to Kale. A small smile, almost imperceptible, flickered on her lips. She felt safe, at least for now, under his gaze. Kale's attention returned to Selene. "The court will not tolerate cruelty disguised as wit," he said. "Not while I walk these halls." The words were simple, yet they carried weight beyond their size. In the silence that followed, Selene realized something unsettling. The brother she had once known, the one she thought weak and absent, was no longer that man. There was power in him now, a quiet but undeniable force. The courtiers held their breath. Even the king, seated at the head of the hall, leaned forward, sensing the tension. The Darien name had always been tied to power, but Kale's return made it something more, something almost mythic. Kale did not linger long. He only needed to make his presence felt. With a quiet nod to Lyra, he turned and left the hall, the echo of his footsteps lingering like a promise. Lyra remained where she was, her heart racing. The shame she had endured felt lighter somehow. He had seen her suffering. He had acted without spectacle, and yet the court had felt it. Selene, left in the sudden quiet, clenched her fists. The smirk had disappeared from her lips. She had underestimated her brother. That was a dangerous mistake. Later, as the evening deepened and shadows crept across the palace walls, Kale walked alone along the high balcony. The wind tugged at his dark hair, and the moon reflected in his eyes. He thought of Lyra, gentle yet unyielding, and of Selene, dangerous yet brilliant. The kingdom itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. He knew the games had only begun. The return of the exiled sovereign was more than a homecoming. It was the start of a reckoning. Kale looked down at the courtyard below, where lanterns flickered like stars fallen to earth. He whispered softly, almost to the wind, "No one humiliates what is mine, not without consequence." A shadow moved in the corner of the balcony, barely seen, watching him. Kale did not notice it yet, but the figure's eyes glimmered with secrets long buried. Magic stirred in the night air, and the world seemed to lean forward, waiting. Lyra's soft hand brushed against the balcony rail as she followed him quietly. He turned, and for a brief moment their eyes met. It was a silent conversation, full of longing and understanding, a promise that they would face whatever came together. And far above, in the towers of the palace, unseen by any, an ancient presence stirred, sensing Kale's power and Lyra's courage. The wind whispered a warning. The path ahead would be dangerous, filled with curses and challenges, and hearts would be tested in ways the living could hardly imagine. But for now, in this quiet moment, Kale's return had shifted the balance. The court had felt it, the kingdom had felt it, and those who dared oppose him would soon understand. Nothing and no one would remain the same. The night stretched on, heavy with unspoken threats, whispered secrets, and the slow, inevitable pull of destiny. And as Kale and Lyra stood together on the balcony, the future seemed to shimmer like a promise just out of reach, filled with danger, longing, and the first stirrings of something neither time nor magic could contain. The next morning, the palace was alive with quiet unrest. Courtiers whispered in hallways. speculating about Kale's sudden return and the unspoken confrontation with Selene. Even the servants moved with a cautious respect, aware that something in the air had changed. Lyra sat in her small, sunlit chamber, tracing the patterns on her modest dress. Her hands were steady, but her heart still beat fast from the memory of Kale's presence. He had come back, and for the first time in years she felt safe. Yet safety in the Darien palace was often an illusion. A soft knock at the door pulled her attention. "Enter," she called. Kale stepped in, silent as a shadow. His dark coat brushed the floor, and the weight of his presence filled the small room. He closed the door gently behind him. Lyra looked up, startled by the closeness of him. "You don't have to endure this alone," Kale said quietly, almost a whisper. "Not anymore." Lyra smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and worry. I am used to it," she admitted softly. "Selene, she enjoys testing patience." Kale's jaw tightened. "It is not patience she tests, it is cruelty, and it will not go unanswered." Lyra's eyes widened. "Kale," she whispered. She did not need him to explain further. The calm in his tone, the weight behind his words, spoke of a power she had only glimpsed once before. Kale turned away, staring toward the balcony window. Beyond it, the morning fog clung to the palace gardens like a soft veil. "There is something you do not know," he said slowly. "The kingdom, our family, it is bound by a curse." Lyra's fingers tightened around her lap. "A curse," she repeated. "What do you mean?" Kale's eyes darkened, shadowed with memories of distant lands. "Long before I was born, our ancestors made a pact with forces beyond our understanding. Pride, envy, cruelty, they do not go unpunished. The curse waits for those who embrace these things, and it has not been idle." Lyra leaned back, swallowing nervously. "Does that mean Selene?" Kale's gaze returned to her. "Yes, her pride and cruelty feed the curse, but it can be undone, not by punishment alone, but by choice, by courage, by love, and that is where you come in." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. "Me? What can I do?" "You already have," Kale said softly. "Your patience, your kindness, your quiet strength, they resist the curse. That is why you are a threat to Selene, though she does not understand it. That is why she tries to break you." Lyra lowered her eyes. "But what if I fail?" Kale reached for her hand. "You will not while we are together." There was a pause, filled with the unspoken tension of two hearts bound by trials yet untested. Then Kale stood, moving toward the balcony. He gestured for Lyra to follow. Outside, the gardens lay in quiet mist, the morning sun beginning to burn through the fog. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew and earth, yet tinged with something otherworldly. Kale led Lyra to a secluded stone circle, carved with ancient symbols worn by time. "This is where I first learned to understand the curse," Kale said. "Here, the air is thin and the world listens. The spirits speak here if you know how to hear." Lyra stared at the carvings, feeling a strange hum in the air. "Spirits?" "Yes," Kale whispered. "The curse is not just punishment, it is alive, it watches, it tests, and if we are careful it can be persuaded." Lyra shivered. "Persuaded how?" Kale knelt beside her, eyes serious, voice low. "Through a pact, not the kind our ancestors made, a different kind. One of trust, courage, and restraint. We ask the spirits to witness our choice, to choose love over pride, mercy over cruelty." Lyra's heart pounded. "Is it safe?" Kale hesitated. "It is not without risk, but doing nothing leaves the curse free to grow. Selene's power, her cruelty, may become unstoppable." Lyra nodded slowly. She trusted him, she had no other choice. "Then we do it," she said, her voice firm. Kale smiled faintly, a rare softness breaking through his usual sternness. "Then we begin." The ritual was simple yet profound. They joined hands in the center of the stone circle. Kale chanted softly, in a language older than the palace itself. Lyra followed as best she could, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. The ground beneath them seemed to hum, and the mist thickened, swirling around their feet. A faint glow began to rise from the carvings, golden and silver threads of light weaving together. Lyra gasped. The air felt alive, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Then, without warning, the light pulsed violently, and the mist thickened into shapes. Figures formed, translucent but imposing. Spirits of the curse, or perhaps the watchers of it, loomed over them. Their eyes glimmered with knowledge and judgment. Kale held Lyra's hand tighter. "Stay calm. Do not fear them. They only test the heart." One figure stepped forward, its face obscured by shadows. Its voice was a whisper that seemed to come from every direction at once. "The one who shames the meek shall find their heart undone, but the one who loves without fear will rise." Lyra felt her breath catch. The words echoed in her mind, resonating with the memory of Seleni's cruelty. She felt the sting, the humiliation, but also the love she had for Kale, the quiet courage that had always been in her heart. Kale's gaze met hers. "Do you understand?" he asked. "Yes," Lyra said, her voice steady. "I choose love. I choose courage. I choose us." The spirits shifted, swirling, and then slowly the light began to fade. The mist dissipated, leaving the garden bathed in soft sunlight. Lyra and Kale stood together, hands still joined, hearts racing. Kale released her hand and exhaled slowly. "It is done for now." "But this is only the beginning." Lyra looked at him, worry still lingering in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "The curse is older than any of us," Kale explained. "It will not vanish completely. It will test us again in ways we cannot yet imagine. Selene, she will not stop. And the court, the kingdom, may not understand our actions." Lyra nodded, understanding the gravity of what they had done. But she also felt a spark of hope. For the first time, she felt that the power of love, quiet, patient, and strong, could truly make a difference. Later that day, Selene entered the hall, unaware that Kale had already taken precautions. She moved with her usual confidence, but something was different. She felt an uneasy tension in the air, a subtle shift she could not name. Kale met her gaze from across the room. His expression was calm, but there was fire in his eyes. Selene's smile faltered slightly. She had always relied on fear and subtle cruelty to command attention, but now she realized she might be overmatched. "Kale," Selene said, her tone measured. "I see you have returned and you have brought your new ideas." Kale inclined his head slightly. "Yes, ideas of fairness, mercy, and justice." Selene's eyes narrowed. She did not understand, yet she felt the weight of something powerful surrounding him. The subtle energy of the curse, of their pact with the spirits, pressed against her pride. Lyra stood nearby, serene yet resolute. Selene looked at her and felt the sting of humiliation she had planned. Kale had not confronted her with anger. He had not made a spectacle. He had simply shifted the balance of power silently, irreversibly. The day passed with the court tense, aware that something fundamental had changed. The courtiers whispered, wondering what had occurred in the gardens, but no one dared ask. The power of the Darien siblings had always been a delicate balance, and Kale's return had upset it completely. As night fell, Kale and Lyra walked through the palace gardens once more. The moon hung low, silver light spilling across the flowers and the fountains. "Do you think Selene will change?" Lyra asked softly. Kale shook his head slowly. "I do not know, she may not, but the choice is hers, and we have chosen ours. That matters more than anything." Lyra leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am glad you returned," she whispered. Kale pressed his hand to hers. "So am I, but this is only the beginning. The curse is awake now, and so are those who would take advantage of it. We must be ready." And somewhere deep within the palace, in the shadows of the highest tower, a presence stirred, unseen and ancient. The spirits of the curse had been awakened, and their eyes gleamed with knowledge. The world had shifted. The balance had changed. And the coming days would test the courage of hearts bound by love, by power, and by destiny itself. The night stretched on, thick with the quiet hum of magic, whispered secrets, and the slow, inevitable pull of fate. Kale and Lyra stood together, hands joined, hearts racing, ready for whatever trials awaited them. The palace was quieter than usual that evening, yet it buzzed with a tension invisible to most but not to Cale. He could feel the pulse of the kingdom through its walls, the subtle shifts in power, the whispers of courtiers, and the restless movement of shadows lingering where they had no right. Something was coming, something that would test them all. Cale walked through the hallways with Lyra at his side. She had grown more confident in the days since their pact with the spirits. Her steps were steady, her head held high, and her eyes, once timid, now glimmered with quiet strength. "Cale," she said softly, her voice barely above the whisper of silk against marble, "do you think the curse will ever truly leave us?" Cale's gaze was fixed ahead, dark and unreadable. "No, the curse is not a thing to be removed entirely. It is a shadow of our ancestors' choices. It watches, waits, and tests. But we have learned something others have not. We have each other, and that counts for more than you might think." Lyra nodded, understanding the depth behind his words. "Then we will face it together." Cale's lips curved into a faint smile, fleeting but real. Together. Meanwhile, Selene was not idle. In the quiet of her chambers she plotted, her mind sharp and calculating. She had felt the change in the air, the subtle energy that Cale and Lyra now carried. It was not fear she felt, it was frustration. She could not accept that the brother she had once underestimated had returned stronger than before, and that Lyra, gentle and kind, had found courage she could not suppress. She paced slowly, hands brushing over the smooth fabric of her gown. Her reflection in the mirror stared back at her, pale and proud. She had been raised to command, to dominate, to bend the world to her will. And yet, for the first time, she felt that the world might not bend so easily. Her lips pressed together as a thought struck her, a dangerous, cunning idea. "If Cale and Lyra think the curse can be persuaded by love and courage," she whispered, "then perhaps it is time to test them and remind them why power cannot be ignored." That night, Cale sensed the shift before any visible sign appeared. In the gardens, where the moonlight painted silver patterns across the stone paths, he paused. The air was colder than before, and the soft rustle of leaves carried a sharpness that was not natural. Lyra, walking beside him, shivered. "Cale, do you feel that?" "Yes," he murmured, scanning the shadows. "Something is moving, not of this world." Before he could act, a chill swept through the garden and ghostly lights flickered along the edges of the hedges. The spirits of the curse, restless and agitated, had been disturbed. The pact they had made had been strong, but the curse itself was cunning, aware, and unrelenting. Cale moved closer to Lyra, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Stay close," he warned. "They test the heart through fear and temptation. Do not falter." The lights coalesced into shapes, humanoid yet shifting, translucent and flickering. Their eyes glimmered with a light that was both judgmental and knowing. Lyra felt her pulse quicken, but she did not step back. She held Cale's hand, drawing strength from his presence. One figure stepped forward, more solid than the others. Its voice was low, echoing through the garden like a distant bell. "The test begins," it said. "The shadow seeks weakness. Only hearts bound in courage will survive." Cale's jaw tightened. "We are ready," he said firmly. "You will find no weakness here." The figure seemed to nod, and the shadows began to shift, forming paths through the garden that twisted and turned as if alive. Cale realized the test was not only of courage but of discernment, of the ability to navigate challenges without yielding to fear or temptation. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes scanning the paths. "Cale, which way?" Cale shook his head. "It is not the way that matters. It is how we walk it. Together, trust me, trust yourself." They moved through the garden, the paths shifting under their feet. At times, illusions appeared, visions of failure, whispers of doubt, and fleeting images of Selene laughing at their struggles. Each time, Cale tightened his grip on Lyra's hand, and she drew strength from his presence. Hours passed, though time felt different in the garden. The moon hung low, and the wind carried voices both real and imagined. At one point, a shadow stretched across Kale's path, forming the shape of Selene herself, taunting and threatening. "You think you can protect her?" the shadow hissed. "You are no stronger than you were before." Kale's eyes flared. "I have learned," he said, his voice steady. "I have changed, and I will not fail." The shadow recoiled, dissolving into mist. Lyra looked at Kale, awe and admiration filling her eyes. You are incredible," she whispered. Kale shook his head. "No, incredible is a word for the careless. We survive because we are together. Remember that." At last the shadows parted, revealing a small clearing in the heart of the garden. In the center stood a stone pedestal, ancient and worn. Upon it rested a crystal, glowing softly with a golden light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Kale and Lyra approached cautiously, understanding instinctively that this was a test's end, yet aware that the final judgment was still to come. The crystal flared suddenly, and a voice, neither male nor female, spoke from its depths. "You have endured fear and temptation. You have chosen courage and love over despair and cruelty. Yet the heart's strength is never final. The world will continue to test you." Lyra felt a warmth fill her chest. We passed?" she asked softly. Kale nodded. "For now, but we must remain vigilant. The curse is patient and Selene is clever. Both will find new ways to challenge us." Just then, a sudden commotion reached their ears. In the palace, Selene had made her move. Using her influence over a group of courtiers, she attempted to undermine Lyra's standing, spreading rumors and manipulating perceptions. Kale felt the shift in power immediately, anger rising but tempered by strategy. "Selene is not done," he murmured. "Her next move will be bold, and it may put everything at risk." Lyra's hand tightened in his. "Then we face it together," she said. "Whatever she does, we will not falter." Kale's dark eyes softened for a moment. "Yes, together." The next day, the court gathered once more. Selene, confident and proud, stepped into the hall, radiating authority. She spoke with grace and cunning, twisting words to favor her ambitions. But Kale and Lyra were prepared. Every subtle attack, every whispered insult, was met with calm dignity or quiet intervention. The courtiers began to notice the shift. The power dynamic had changed. Selene's frustration grew. She could see that her tactics were less effective against a couple united not only by love but by courage and the bond they had strengthened through the ritual. Her pride bristled, but she remained composed. For now. Later that evening, Kale took Lyra to the balcony once again. The kingdom lay beneath them, silvered in moonlight. They stood in silence for a while, listening to the wind and feeling the weight of the challenges that awaited them. "Do you think she will change?" Lyra asked again, her voice soft. Kale shook his head slowly. "I do not know. She may never change, but the important thing is that we remain true to ourselves. That is the only power that matters." Lyra leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am glad you returned, Kale. No matter what comes, I know we will survive it together." Kale's lips pressed to the top of her head. "We will. And one day the kingdom will understand that love and courage are stronger than envy and cruelty." But in the shadows of the palace, Selene's eyes burned with unspoken fury. She had been challenged, and she would not forget. The curse, ever patient, waited with her, sensing the cracks, the doubts, and the ambitions that still lingered. The game was far from over, and somewhere beyond the palace walls, a presence watched silently, ancient and knowing. The spirits of the curse, disturbed but not defeated, observed the bond of Kale and Lyra with interest. The test was not over, and the shadows of fate were only beginning to close in. The night stretched on, full of whispers, secrets, and the tension of hearts bound by love, courage, and destiny. The palace had never been quieter, yet the silence carried a weight heavier than any storm. Shadows lingered along the walls, and the air seemed charged with expectation. Kale stood in the grand hall, his dark coat falling neatly over his shoulders, his eyes sharp and unyielding. Beside him, Lyra's hand brushed against his, a silent anchor, a quiet assurance that whatever came, they would face it together. The curse, though weakened by their pact, had not disappeared. Its presence was subtle but insistent, testing the hearts of the kingdom's residents, particularly those of Selene. The stepsister, once so cruel and proud, now faced the consequences of her actions. The spirits of the curse whispered constantly, weaving their influence like invisible threads, challenging her resolve. Selene stood at the far end of the hall, her posture straight but her eyes betraying uncertainty. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of choice pressing down upon her. Pride and ambition had guided her for so long, yet they had brought her not victory but a reckoning. Kale's return and the quiet strength of Lyra had shifted the balance of power, forcing Selene to confront her own heart. Kale's gaze swept the hall, landing on Selene. "The time has come," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "You have a choice, stepsister. Continue on the path of pride and cruelty or accept the chance to change. Redemption is not weakness, it is strength." Selene's jaw tightened. She had spent her life controlling the world around her, bending people to her will, and yet here she was, feeling powerless before her own conscience. The shadows of the curse flickered around her, and she realized that only her own choices could alter their course. Lyra stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Selene, you do not have to be defined by your mistakes. You can still choose to be better." For a moment, Selene said nothing. Her mind raced, memories flashing through her thoughts. The moments she had humiliated Lyra, the manipulations she had used to maintain power, the anger she had nurtured for years. And yet she saw something in Lyra, something she could not take or twist: courage, kindness, and love. Finally, Selene spoke, her voice low and hesitant. "And if I try and fail," Kale stepped closer, "then you try again. True strength lies in the willingness to face yourself, to face your own heart, and to continue." The hall seemed to hold its breath as Selene's shoulders relaxed slightly. The shadows of the curse flickered and dimmed, responding to her choice. It was not a sudden transformation, not a miracle, but a beginning. That evening, Kale led Lyra and Selene to the ancient stone circle in the gardens. The place where Kale and Lyra had first made their pact now seemed alive with soft, golden light. The spirits of the curse were present, watching, testing, but not with malice. Their gaze was expectant, waiting to see if Selene's heart would follow her words with action. Selene stepped into the circle, her steps tentative. I do not know if I can undo all I have done," she admitted. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "You do not need to undo everything. You need only begin. That is enough." Lyra reached out, placing her hand over Selene's. "We will help you," she said softly. "You are not alone." A soft wind swirled around them, carrying the voices of the spirits. The ground beneath their feet hummed, and light rose from the carvings in gentle spirals. Selene closed her eyes, focusing on her choice, her will to change. Slowly, deliberately, she let go of her pride, her need for control, and embraced the first flicker of humility. The spirits responded, and the light enveloped the three of them. It was not blinding, but it was warm, comforting, and powerful. Kale and Lyra felt the energy of the curse shift, weakening, bending toward harmony rather than conflict. The long shadow that had threatened the kingdom's heart began to lift. When the light receded, Selene's posture was different. Not completely changed, not yet perfect, but softened, balanced, and aware. She looked at Lyra and Kale with something approaching respect. I will try," she said, her voice steady now. "I do not know if I can be what I should have been, but I will try." Kale nodded, a rare smile touching his lips. "That is all anyone can ask." The three of them left the stone circle, the garden bathed in moonlight. For the first time in years, there was peace in the air. The kingdom, sensing the change, seemed to breathe along with them, shadows retreating, whispers fading into quiet. Back in the palace, the court gathered again. Selene, now tempered by the events in the garden, approached with dignity. She addressed the courtiers not with pride or cruelty, but with honesty and humility. Her words carried weight, and the nobles began to see the stepsister in a new light. Respect replaced fear, and the halls of the palace seemed to shine brighter for it. Lyra stood beside Kale, proud yet humble. She had endured humiliation, doubt, and fear, and now she stood unshaken, her love for Kale and her courage evident to all. Kale's presence beside her amplified her strength, their bond a visible force that even the most skeptical could not ignore. Selene approached them, her voice quiet but sincere. I am sorry," she said to Lyra, "for everything, and to you, Kale, for underestimating you. I will do better." Lyra's smile was warm, forgiving. "Thank you, Selene. That means more than you know." Kale's gaze softened as he looked at his stepsister. "Redemption is a path, not a destination. Keep walking it." The nights that followed were quiet, filled with small acts of trust, laughter, and renewed hope. The palace no longer felt oppressive, and the shadows that had once haunted the halls were diminished. Kale and Lyra's bond deepened, tested and strengthened by the trials they had faced. But the kingdom still held mysteries. The curse was weakened, yes, but its presence lingered, subtle and patient. Kale and Lyra knew that vigilance would always be necessary, that love and courage must be renewed each day. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold and crimson over the palace towers, Kale and Lyra stood on the balcony, gazing at the horizon. The wind carried a soft promise, whispering through the leaves and flowers. Kale's hand brushed Lyra's, holding it firmly. "We have endured much," he said, his voice quiet but full of meaning. "The curse tested us, Selene tested us, and yet we remain, stronger together." Lyra leaned her head against his shoulder. "I never thought I could feel this safe, this loved, but with you I do, and I will never forget it." Kale kissed her forehead gently. "You have changed everything, Lyra. Your courage has saved more than just yourself. It has saved us all." Far below, the kingdom stirred. People went about their lives, unaware of the quiet battles that had taken place in the shadows, the courage and love that had shaped the fate of the land. Yet the energy in the air had shifted. The curse was no longer a looming terror. It was a reminder of the power of choice, and the strength of hearts united by trust and love. Selene, now walking through the palace corridors, paused to look out a window at the city below. She felt the first spark of something she had never known: humility. Not weakness, but awareness of her place, her responsibilities, and the importance of her choices. For the first time, she understood that power was not only in command or fear, but in compassion, courage, and the willingness to change. The night deepened, and the moon rose high above the towers. The palace, bathed in silver light, seemed almost alive, a reflection of the hearts within it. Kale and Lyra remained on the balcony, silent but connected, knowing that the trials of the curse were behind them, at least for now. Their love, tempered by adversity, had become a force that no darkness could easily overcome. And somewhere beyond the walls, in the highest towers and deepest shadows, the spirits of the curse watched quietly, no longer hostile but expectant. They had tested the hearts of the living and seen courage and love triumph. Their whispers, soft and distant, carried through the air like a lullaby. The hearts that love without fear have risen. The path is long, but the light endures. Kale and Lyra held each other as the first light of dawn painted the sky in gold and rose. The kingdom was at peace, the past reconciled, and the future open. The shadows of envy, cruelty, and fear had been tempered, not erased, a reminder that life would always test those who dared to live fully. And yet, for now, love had won. Courage had triumphed. The bonds forged through trial and choice had shaped not just two hearts, but an entire kingdom. Kale whispered softly into Lyra's hair, his words almost lost in the morning breeze. "Even when the world challenges us, even when darkness returns, we rise together. Always." Lyra smiled, her eyes shining with tears of joy and relief. Always, she echoed. The palace remained quiet, yet it no longer felt oppressive. The world beyond its walls stretched wide and bright, filled with possibilities and promise. And though the curse might test them again someday, Kale, Lyra, and even Selene now understood that the truest power lay not in magic, wealth, or pride, but in the courage to love, the strength to forgive, and the wisdom to choose the right path, no matter how difficult. The story of the Darien siblings, of the humble yet courageous Lyra, and of the dark, powerful Kale had reached a turning point. Shadows had been faced, hearts tested, and love had triumphed. And as the sun rose fully, bathing the kingdom in light, the world seemed to whisper a single truth. Even in darkness, hope endures, and the hearts that choose courage and love will always rise.